In light of President Trump's recent tariff announcement on Canada, Mexico and China, global tensions are reaching a boiling point. With Canada and Mexico negotiating temporary reprieves and China retaliating with its own levies, the world braces for potential economic disruption. Today we explore the stakes and the ramifications of this situation with Mr. Ihab Omar, a journalist from Al-Ahram newspaper from Cairo, and Mr. Rami Al-Alyoubi, a high school economics lecturer from Moscow. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on Think Tank. Mr. Omar, I'll start off with you first. Now, what specific goals did President Trump aim to achieve with the newly imposed tariffs? Does he employ to negotiate better trade deals?
Greetings to you and your guest. Trump's goal, among of them the Trumps, that opens an open war. In reality, there are political objectives from one hand. If we review the latest statements between Canada and Mexico and the USA, Trump's demand is just to discipline the border of the human trafficking and the activity of the cartels that starting from California to the Mexico. And along with the joint borders, Canada talked about trafficking drugs and the China's responsibility according to the American security. Therefore, Trump isn't a crazy man, but he has an agenda, and not only economic measures, but related to politics in general. If we talk about the idea of the tariffs with the China, certainly he doesn't want to create a political crisis with China, but he ambitious is to shrinking the Chinese product in the American markets, to revive the economy in America. At the same time, goes with the EU, doesn't wish for the EU to import gas from Russia and oil from the Gulf. But he thinks it is better for Europe to import gas and oil from USA, as America defended the EU in the First and the Second World War. So it is Trump's logic. He wishes for each European country to repay 5% of the GDP in the NATO. His logic, as America is defending Europe without getting any return, or to help Europe in that file. Trump has a great agenda since the first term that related to a set of military political measures, and when he found that the dialogue isn't benefited, resorted to the custom tariffs. As the whole world wishes to import their goods to USA, so he wants to close the market before anyone does not listen to the United States and not taking the USA interest in their minds.
Well, Mr. Alyoubi, what are the potential long-term effects of these tariffs on the U.S. economy? Will it actually result in the revitalization of the domestic American production, or will it have a negative toll? Will it take a negative toll on the U.S. economy?
These higher tariffs can have a positive impact on U.S. industry, but at the same time, these tariffs will lead to higher inflation rates. And this was actually one of the problems of the Biden era, and one of the reasons he lost his popularity was high inflation. So now Trump risks to further or to push inflation higher, but on the other hand, when there is more industrial development, there will be more jobs, and during his first term, Trump kept repeating jobs, jobs, jobs. As being a businessman before being a politician, he sees the strength of the United States in creating jobs, in economic development, in protectionism, and not in supporting different countries behind the Atlantic, as was the case with Biden, who was or who can be characterized with a high degree of Euro-Atlantic solidarity.
Mhm. Well, Mr. Omar, what is the significance of the temporary hold in tariff implementation, talking obviously about Canada and Mexico, and how might it influence future negotiations? Does it signal that Trump has a bigger chance of actually negotiating with Mexico and Canada rather than China?
It's an temporary holding for 30 minutes just regarding Canada and Mexico that affirms what is stipulated in the first phase, as Trump has several measures regarding the national security and the border patrol. Therefore, when Canada to Trump hold its measures for 30 days. It's like a test for Canada and Mexico with the measurement of deploying their army troops on the borders and to prevent the system crimes. And it is a success for Trump to impose the national security view upon Canada and Mexico and to stop the reluctance of Mexico and Canada of the national security. That would reflect to his direction to EU and China with the same manner. Today we started to listen about a current negotiation between Beijing and Trump in order to escalate the suspension of the levies of 10% announced by Trump. And this resolution is going to be hard for the Chinese economy, as a Chinese and a great power that would sabotage the Chinese economy in the industrial sectors. Therefore, the response and the acceptance of Canada and Mexico for Trump's measures would go positively and in dealing with China and EU. And this month has already scored results, in fact, so it can be implemented with other countries, such as EU countries.
Mr. Ali, what specific retaliatory measures have Canada Mexico proposed or enacted? What sort of compromises do you think they actually will make?
Actually, there will be some compromise because although Trump is on the other hand, the prosperity of the Western world is based on globalization and free trade. So, of course, any movement or any step that negatively impacts international trade will be refused by any trade lobbies. So at the end of the day, there will be some compromise, I guess. And actually, during his first presidency, Trump started a war against Chinese Huawei, but at the end of the day, there were implied some sanctions, easy to work with, so not such sanctions which stopped the work of Huawei.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Omar, let's go with the scenario of these tariffs being enacted on Canada and Mexico. How might these tariffs affect the US-Canada and the US-Mexico relations on the long run?
My estimation, even Trump, he's a very rational person that aware of the idea that his policies that would lead to a trade war. I think that him personally is not going to go that far because that is a man that he is pursued to end the old wars, not to create new ones. So also to discipline the relations with the whole world, not only in Mexico and Canada. Not to impose an American word upon others, but for the joint interest. From one hand, his notion is related to the economy and the relations with America. If their idea are joint, so these goods will flow to America freely, and all parties will be winning, and which is the best equation for the modern policy.
Mr. Ayyubi, what immediate effects would be expected in the global financial markets following the announcement of these tariffs?
I don't think there will be any global effect, because although the United States are the first world economic power from the point of view of net GDP, but on the other hand, the world during the last few years and decades is much more divided, and now the example is Russia, which is under Western sanctions, but it continues to trade freely with China, India, Arab countries, and African countries. So there will be some negative local effect, but no global effect, I think.
Mr. Omar, now China might be pursuing legal actions. Now, what sort of legal actions is China considering in response to Trump's tariffs?
I think there are no abilities of the International Labour Organization or, for instance, or the Supreme Court in USA to hinder the southern resolution of Trump. So it is an executive one already, and we've seen the quick and swift response of Canada and Mexico. Therefore, the idea of China is resorting to a legal solution won't lead to anything. And China, in fact, is directing Trump's administration in a quite behind-the-scene dialogue to solve the problem. With the same base of win-to-win situation, and Trump is to pursue so far with the internal affairs along with the deep state and the industrial complexes that would affect at large other with the problems with the Trump with China and Canada and Mexico, or even in the Middle East.
Well, Mr. Ayyubi, you've mentioned that maybe there will be no sort of reactions in terms of global trade relations, but we're talking about the second biggest economy in the world, China. Now, in what ways might China's response escalate the tensions in global trade relations? We're talking about the two biggest economies in the world getting into a...
I guess China will try to find some compromise or solution, because on one hand, China develops its ties with Russia and Africa and the Arab world, and last year the trade between Russia and China reached almost $250 billion US. But on the other hand, the trade between China on one side and the United States and Europe on the other side is above $1.5 trillion per year. So in this case, China, which is ambitious to become the first economic world power in this century, cannot sacrifice any ties with the West because of some Trump decisions. And Trump will stay in the White House only for 4 years, but China has some global goals for the whole 21st century.
Then, Mr. Omar, how could a lawsuit against the United States really impact the future trade negotiations between China and the US? Because it seems that both of you are saying that China will reach some sort of a compromise. Trump will find a way to make it. So is it a case of who's calling bluff first?
عفوا لم أسمع السؤال جيدا.
Sir, do you think that having a lawsuit against the United States will impact any future trade negotiations between China and the US, or do you think that they will iron out their differences and find a way to play ball?
بتقديري أن هناك توصية سوف تحدث أن هناك
I think that there is going to be a compromise between China and the USA. China is more flexible regarding its economy, the industry, wouldn't allow it to go for an industrial or economic war. China, through their history, is avoiding some sort of this war. We've never seen in the history of China any colonization, and China is always defending its order even before the neighboring. It is its doctrine not to go into disagreements and wars. And also it is for the interest of China to wait for the past years of Trump and see the stance of America regarding such issues. Therefore, it's for China's interest to reach an agreement and settlement, even to waiving of raising a lawsuit against America. It's in a paper of negotiation, and I think that before this February 2025 will be some sort of a compromise between China and the second term of Trump in the file of the tariffs.
Well, Mr. Ayyubi, one final question now. How is there a role for the international organizations to play, such as the World Trade Organization, the European Union, if they become the next targets of Trump's tariffs?
Actually, the European Union has no much choices, only to wait when the Trump's term will end in 2029, because actually it's now Europe is the main victim of economic victim of the war between Russia and Ukraine, because now Europe is short of gas, and it has to buy the liquefied natural gas from Qatar, from the United States, from Norway, so it has no much choice to stand against the United States now.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. Ihab Omar, the journalist from Al Ahram newspaper, and Mr. Ramil Ayyubi, a high school economics lecturer. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on Think Tank.